They laughed when I reached for the helm. Lieutenant Brennan slapped my hand away in front of everyone, calling me too fragile for command. The crew whispered I was a diversity hire who didn't belong. But when the Admiral's voice crackled through that radio with my real name, their faces went white. If you love stories about underdogs silencing their doubters, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because this journey is just getting started. The salt air hit my face the moment I stepped onto the deck of the USS Resolute, and I remember thinking how different it felt from what I'd imagined. Heavier somehow, more real. I clutched my duffel bag against my hip, listening to the rhythm of boots on metal echoing through the corridors, and felt completely invisible. That was the point, of course. No one was supposed to know who I really was. To them, I was just Reverie Cole, Rev, if anyone bothered to ask, a junior tactical officer fresh out of some forgettable training program. Young, uncertain, unremarkable. I could feel their eyes on me during that first morning briefing, sizing me up like I was a mistake someone made in personnel. Lieutenant Brennan Holt stood at the front of the room, all confidence and decorated service ribbons, his voice carrying that easy authority that comes from years of people listening to you. When he got to my name on the roster, he paused. Actually paused. Then he looked directly at me and said, "You look like you've never even been on a fishing boat, let alone a warship." The room erupted in laughter. Not nervous chuckles, full-throated laughs that echoed off the steel walls and made my stomach twist into knots. I felt my face burn hot, that awful crawling sensation that starts at your chest and climbs up your neck. But I stayed silent. I had to. Across the table, Ensign Tegan Voss, sharp-eyed, ambitious, and clearly Brennan's favorite, smirked and whispered something to the officer next to her. Chief Petty Officer Landry Cross, an old-school sailor with more years at sea than I'd been alive, didn't even bother looking up from his coffee. Dismissed before I'd even spoken a word, they assigned me to inventory duty, checking supply levels, filing reports, cleaning stations that didn't need cleaning, work designed to keep me busy and out of the way. I spent my days counting boxes in storage compartments that smelled like oil and rust, the metallic scent clinging to my uniform, my hands, my hair. Every night I'd return to my bunk and overhear the whispers through the thin walls. "She's just a quota hire. Bet she won't last a month. Wonder who she knew to get assigned here." The worst part wasn't the words. It was the casual cruelty of it. The way they talked about me like I wasn't even human enough to have feelings, like I was just this inconvenient checkbox someone had to tick. Then came the navigation drill. We were running standard protocols, nothing complicated, but I noticed it immediately. An error in the coordinates that would throw off our positioning by nearly 3 nautical miles. It was subtle, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't paying attention, but I'd run these calculations 1,000 times. I knew I was right, so without thinking, I reached toward the control panel to correct it. The slap came so fast, I barely registered it until the sting spread across the back of my hand. Brennan had physically struck my hand away from the controls, hard enough that my fingers went numb for a moment. The bridge went silent. 12 crew members, all frozen, all staring. "Did anyone tell you to touch that?" His voice was ice. "Stay in your lane, Cole. You're here to learn, not to play captain." I pulled my hand back, cradling it against my chest, feeling the throb where his palm had connected. Tegan's smile was predatory. Someone behind me coughed to cover a laugh. And I stood there, jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack, tasting something metallic and bitter, the taste of swallowing words you're dying to scream. The mechanical pencil in my other hand snapped under the pressure of my grip, the sound sharp and final in that suffocating silence. That night, alone in my bunk, I made a decision. They wanted me invisible? Fine. I'd be invisible. But I'd also be watching, learning, waiting, because they had no idea who they were really dealing with. I couldn't sleep that night. The humiliation kept replaying in my mind like a broken record, the sound of that slap, the laughter, the way Brennan looked at me like I was nothing. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up trying to rest and found myself walking through the dimly lit corridors toward the bridge. The ship felt different at night, quieter, almost peaceful. There was only a skeleton crew on duty, and the night officer barely glanced up when I entered. I had clearance to be there. Clearance that should have raised questions, actually, but he just nodded and went back to his monitors. I sat down at the tactical console and let my fingers hover over the keys for a moment before diving in. This was who I really was. Not the fumbling junior officer they saw during the day, but someone who'd graduated top of her class at the Naval Academy. Someone who'd spent 3 years in specialized command training that most officers would never even hear about. Someone who'd written combat scenarios that were now standard curriculum. I pulled up simulation after simulation, running advanced tactical exercises that would have made Brennan's head spin. My fingers moved across the controls with a confidence I had to hide during daylight hours, and for the first time since boarding this ship, I felt like myself again. The truth was, I wasn't here by accident. Admiral Thorne had handpicked me for this assignment, an undercover assessment of crew readiness before I officially took command. He wanted to know who these people really were when they thought no one important was watching, and boy, were they showing me. 3 weeks into this charade, everything changed during a night operation. The weather reports had mentioned possible rough seas, but nothing prepared us for the Category 3 storm that materialized out of nowhere. I was on the bridge when the first alarms started blaring, when the ship began rolling so violently that unsecured equipment crashed to the floor. Rain hammered against the reinforced windows like bullets, and the emergency lighting cast everything in an ominous red glow that made everyone's faces look like strangers. Brennan took command of the response, barking orders with that same self-assured tone he always had, but I saw it immediately, the error in his navigation protocol. He was steering us deeper into the storm's path, toward waters that would tear this ship apart. My heart started pounding, not from fear of the storm, but from the realization that I was watching a disaster unfold in real time. "Sir," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady over the howling wind and blaring alarms. "The coordinates are wrong. We need to adjust our heading by—" "Not now, Cole." He didn't even look at me. "Get below deck where you belong." Tegan materialized at his side, her face pale but her voice cutting. "She's panicking, sir. She's not cut out for this." The dismissal in her tone made my blood boil. The ship lurched again, harder this time, and I watched Brennan make another mistake. Then another. Each wrong decision compounding the last, taking us closer to the point of no return. I had a choice in that moment. I could stay silent, protect my cover, and let these arrogant fools prove exactly how incompetent they were. Or I could break protocol and save this ship. It wasn't really a choice at all. I grabbed the intercom and started broadcasting emergency counter orders directly to the engine room, using command codes that only senior officers should know. The words came out sharp and precise, each instruction calculated to pull us out of danger. I heard Brennan's roar of fury before I felt his hand on my shoulder, spinning me around with enough force that I stumbled. His face was inches from mine, contorted with rage and confusion. "Who the hell do you think you are?" The bridge had gone silent except for the storm. Everyone was staring at us, waiting to see what would happen next. I met his eyes, let him see something there he'd never noticed before, the absolute certainty of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "Someone who actually knows what she's doing," I said, my voice cold and steady as steel. Then I turned back to the controls and saved his ship. The storm passed, leaving behind an eerie calm that felt almost accusatory. The ship was safe, damage was minimal, and every single person on that bridge knew I'd just overridden their precious Lieutenant Brennan and saved all their lives. You'd think there'd be gratitude, maybe even a grudging respect. Instead, there was silence, the kind of silence that comes before an explosion. Brennan didn't waste time. By morning, he'd filed formal charges against me for insubordination, unauthorized use of command protocols, and about 6 other infractions he'd managed to dig up. Tegan backed him up with a statement that painted me as unstable, reckless, dangerous, Someone who'd panicked during a crisis and endangered the entire crew with my emotional outburst. The irony would have been funny if my career wasn't supposedly on the line. They assembled everyone in the briefing room 2 days later, senior officers, department heads, even some of the crew who'd witnessed the storm response. I stood at attention while Brennan laid out his case, his voice dripping with righteous indignation. He was good, I'll give him that. He made it sound like I'd committed mutiny. Landry Cross sat in the back, his weathered face unreadable, saying nothing. I couldn't tell if he believed Brennan's version or if he was just staying out of it. Then the communication system crackled to life, and Admiral Gideon Thorne's face appeared on the large monitor at the front of the room. Fleet Commander, 3 stars. The kind of man whose presence makes everyone straighten their spine instinctively. The briefing room went so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Lieutenant Holt. The Admiral's voice filled the space, grave and authoritative. I understand you've requested formal charges against Tactical Officer Cole? Brennan stood taller, confident in his position. Yes, sir. She's a danger to this ship and crew. Her actions during the storm were— That's interesting, Lieutenant. The Admiral's interruption was surgical. Because Tactical Officer Cole doesn't exist. The confusion was immediate. I watched heads turn, officers exchanging glances, trying to process what they'd just heard. Tegan's perfectly composed mask cracked just slightly. Brennan's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. The woman you've been harassing for the past 3 weeks, Admiral Thorne continued, his eyes boring through the screen, is Commander Reverie Cole, my personal selection for the new commanding officer of the USS Resolute. The room didn't just go quiet, it went dead. I could see Brennan's face drain of color in real time, watch the realization crash over him like a second storm. Tegan had gone completely pale, her confident smirk replaced by something that looked like sheer panic. Even Landry had risen to his feet, standing at attention with an expression I couldn't quite read. Commander Cole was conducting an undercover assessment of crew dynamics and readiness before officially taking command, the Admiral said, each word landing like a hammer. Your behavior, Lieutenant Holt, has told me everything I needed to know about your fitness for leadership. Ensign Voss, the same applies to you. I stood there, letting his words settle over the room like fallout. Then, slowly, deliberately, I reached up and removed the tactical officer insignia from my collar. Underneath, where I'd kept them hidden for 3 weeks, were my commander pins. I'd worn them against my skin every single day, a reminder of who I really was beneath the disguise. Lieutenant Holt, I said, my voice steady and clear, you slapped my hand away from controls I'm more qualified to operate than you'll ever be. Ensign Voss, you called me a quota hire, but you couldn't pass the tactical exam I wrote. I let that sink in for a moment before turning to Landry. Chief Cross, you're the only one who trusted the orders when they mattered. Thank you. Brennan found his voice, started stammering some kind of apology, his words tripping over each other in desperate panic. I held up one hand, cutting him off clean. You're reassigned effective immediately, both of you. I looked between Brennan and Tegan, saw their careers crumbling in their eyes. This isn't revenge. This is about the safety of everyone on this ship, and you proved you put ego above that. The Admiral nodded once, then his screen went dark, and just like that, everything changed. The days following the revelation felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Word spread through the ship faster than wildfire. The junior officer they'd mocked, dismissed, and humiliated was actually their new commanding officer. I could feel the shift in the air every time I walked through a corridor. Sailors who'd ignored me now pressed themselves against the walls to let me pass. Officers who'd laughed at Brennan's jokes now couldn't meet my eyes. The ship felt different. Or maybe I just felt different in it. Brennan and Tegan were gone within 48 hours, transferred to desk positions at the naval station in San Diego. I didn't take pleasure in it. Not really. There's no satisfaction in destroying someone's career, even when they deserve it. But I also didn't lose sleep over it. They'd shown me exactly who they were. People who mistook cruelty for strength, who'd rather tear someone down than lift them up. The Navy didn't need leaders like that. My crew didn't need leaders like that. The official change of command ceremony was scheduled for a bright Thursday morning. The entire crew assembled on deck in their dress uniforms, standing in perfect formation under a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. I stood in my cabin beforehand, staring at myself in the mirror, running my fingers over the gold stripes on my sleeves. 4 years of academy training, 3 years of classified command programs, countless sleepless nights studying tactics and strategy until my eyes burned, and 3 weeks of being treated like I didn't matter, like I was too weak, too fragile, too incompetent to belong. All of it had led to this moment. When I stepped onto the deck, I saw Landry Cross waiting for me, my new executive officer. He'd earned the position not through politics or favoritism, but because when it mattered most, he'd trusted competence over rank. He'd followed my orders in that storm because they were the right orders, not because of who was giving them. That's the kind of officer I needed beside me. He saluted with a crispness that spoke of genuine respect, and I returned it with equal precision. The ceremony itself was traditional, formal, full of the pomp and circumstance the Navy loves. But when I placed my hands on the helm for the first time as the official commanding officer, everything else faded away. I felt the smooth, worn leather under my palms, leather that had been touched by dozens of commanders before me. I felt the subtle vibration of the engines humming through the deck beneath my feet, that steady pulse that meant the ship was alive and ready. And beyond the bow, stretching out to the horizon in every direction, was the endless ocean. These were the same controls Brennan had slapped my hand away from. The same station where he'd told me to stay in my lane, where he'd made me feel small and worthless in front of everyone. I thought about that moment now, about the sting on the back of my hand and the taste of swallowed rage. It felt like it had happened to someone else, in another lifetime. The truth was, I wouldn't change any of it. The humiliation had been real. God, it had been real. The anger had burned hot enough to keep me awake at night, but it had also shown me exactly who belonged on my crew and who didn't. It had revealed character in ways that interviews and service records never could. Command isn't about being liked or making friends. It's about being trusted when everything goes to hell. It's about making the hard calls when lives depend on it. And it's about surrounding yourself with people who value competence over ego, who choose teamwork over glory. I looked out at my crew, at faces that now watched me with respect instead of dismissal, and felt something settle deep in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, more like rightness. This was where I was supposed to be. They told me not to touch the controls, I said softly, more to myself than anyone else. Now I'm steering the whole damn ship. And we were ready for anything. Some people mistake silence for weakness, kindness for incompetence, but the ones who underestimate you, they're the ones who end up saluting you in the end. If this story hit home, let me know in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated? Subscribe for more stories about people who turned their biggest doubters into their biggest believers. See you in the next one.